All right, we want to thank everyone for attending. More folks are going to be trickling in. And as you can see, there's only three of us at the moment. Jenna is actually on her way back from a writing camp, which is the songwriter life, right? So she's going to join us as soon as she can, but we're going to get this started as it's 1:03. We want to be mindful of everyone's time. So I'm Terra Lopez. I'm the community manager and head of artist partnerships at Backline, for those that don't know me. And today we have a very special fireside chat with the SONA Foundation. And as most of you probably know, Backline is a resource hub for the music industry. We aim to provide the industry with as many tools and resources as possible to support their mental health and wellness. We've teamed up with the SONA Foundation, a nonprofit community-centered arts organization that is dedicated to providing mental health, financial well-being, career development, and emergency funding for songwriters and music creators for this very special fireside chat to talk all about mental health, specifically for songwriters. Arielle, this is our third fireside chat, right?
That's right. Yeah. Third or fourth.
Third or fourth. Yeah. Very, very excited to have this fireside chat and to talk about imposter syndrome specifically, and also performance anxiety, two things that I'm very well versed in. So I'll introduce Jenna, because when she gets here, I'm sure we'll have a ton of questions already. So Jenna Andrews is going to join us shortly. She's a songwriter, producer, artist, and host of the Green Room Talks. She is a creative powerhouse who has worked with everyone from BTS to Drake, Tori Kelly, Noah Cyrus, and many, many more. It was wild to see all the names that she's worked with in her bio. She is now based in Nashville and LA, and Jenna broke recently into the podcast world in 2020 with the Green Room Talks. It's a one-of-a-kind series that explores the intersections between creativity and mental health. We also have artist, songwriter, yoga teacher, and coordinator for the SONA Foundation, Arielle Silver. And lastly, we have Backline's clinical director, Ari Jacobson. Ari heads Backline's clinical team and case management program and is such a valuable member of the Backline team, who has helped build a robust national clinical network of mental health and wellness providers for the music community. Arielle is going to be moderating the chat box, so if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll get to them. All right, so today we're talking about imposter syndrome and performance anxiety, along with mental health in general. Ari, what is imposter syndrome? Because as Arielle and I were talking before we hopped onto this chat, we were talking about like what we think imposter syndrome is or what it means to us, but obviously, it's a wide spectrum. So can you tell us what imposter syndrome is?
Absolutely. Excuse me as I get over a small cough. Imposter syndrome, I think one of the main things that I want to highlight is exactly what you just mentioned, that it can really look very different in every single person. Most fields professionally are going to have some level of imposter syndrome, where the overall thought is, yes, I am apparently qualified to be doing this, but am I really that qualified? I've always referenced it to that moment where you become a police officer and you go, oh my gosh, somebody should call 911. No, you are 911 and you are ready to be 911. So there are a couple of different things that actually really fall into imposter syndrome and what it might look like for specifically the music industry. There's this idea of self-doubt, the questioning as to why people want to see me perform, why people actually enjoy my music. Do people really like that song that maybe only took me 10 minutes to write versus that song that's taken me a lifetime to really compose? There's also this fear of exposure. Maybe you have a very strong persona on stage, but inside you're really kind of more reserved and you're not really as comfortable on stage as you might seem. It's just something that you love to do and it's a passion that you have, but part of enjoying that passion is breaking out of your comfort zone. Many people can really experience that fear that somebody is going to learn about their true self, and with that true self will then shed a different light and maybe change people's perspective on your professional success or even abilities. In many cases, people will start to just minimize their achievements. They'll downplay what they've done in effort to try and make people almost think less of them, and not in a negative way to think less, but they want to kind of keep their reputation where it feels comfortable. What happens if you get outside of that comfort zone and now all of a sudden you're like, I shouldn't be this big, or why did my song get onto the radio? There's this guilt of success. How come my best friend who practices 100 hours a week hasn't made it big and I just suddenly made it onto the radio? And then with that, especially once you've achieved any minimal level of success, and success is really your own perspective. So you wrote your first song, you've performed for the first time ever on stage, you just sold out your first arena. There's this level of perfectionism that can really develop where now your thought is, I have to be perfect. And if I'm not perfect, then I'm not as good as I think I am, or I'm not as good as you think I am. So we're putting this pressure onto yourself to be this level of perfection that probably doesn't even really exist. And then finally, what the imposter syndrome can really look like is some really significant isolation. You might really avoid people who, in some cases, might really help expand your career, but you're worried about being around them because you think that they're way more qualified or they're way more talented. And if you can't relate to some of your closest peers, then being able to grow with them is probably going to be impossible. So a lot of this combined can look very different in people. You might have one symptom of it. You might have all of them. As a therapist, we go through this imposter syndrome frequently where you go, why are these people coming to me for my help when I can barely help myself right now? But it's just a common thing. And the way I kind of look at it in the performing world is, as a therapist, if I have a bad day, I have the ability to just kind of shut my computer, go home, maybe say I had a bad day. Worst case, tell a client like, hey, I'm sorry, I was a little off today. I am not the one that's standing on stage trying to perform in front of X number of people and then feel like I have to be there perfect.
Oh man, Ari, I think I heard as you were talking that there's a connection between imposter syndrome and self-sabotage, because if there's a disconnect between how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us. Particularly, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but I was thinking of, those moments that we have worked so hard for, those gigs, for example, or, other kinds of opportunities. And we don't invite the exact person. We don't tell the person that we want in the room about it, or we don't send that invitation, or we don't put ourselves out there. That those like ways of self-sabotaging, and you're making me realize that maybe they're coming from this idea of that disconnect between where we are and where we perceive ourselves to be.
Sure. And actually, it creates a really nasty cycle where it can fall into what we call our self-fulfilling prophecy, where if I believe that this is going to be the worst show of my life and I'm going to perform terribly, and I keep telling myself this is going to be the worst show ever, statistically, it is proven that it's probably going to be a pretty bad show. But if you're exhausted and you're struggling and you're going, today I'm in a town that I know has never seen me before and I'm going to put on a real hell of a show, statistically you're going to have a better show. So once you start to believe and kind of fill yourself into this, or excuse me, put yourself into the situation where you can start to believe that you are capable of what you're doing, then you will actually be able to kind of produce that that product. But if you're kind of self-sabotaging, what that also happens is then you go, well, I put on the show and it didn't work out. So clearly I was right, which then tells me that I actually am an imposter. So now it makes me feel more comfortable with my negative thoughts. And then that negative thought just got reinforced.
Like we sought the evidence. We were seeking evidence to prove one way or the other. So if we believe we're an imposter and we set ourselves up by self-sabotaging, then we can collect that evidence that proves that we're an imposter, even though this is all manufactured by an internal narrative and is not actually reflective of our capability or, where we stand.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Oh, heavy.
So heavy. And I've personally experienced imposter syndrome, specifically when it comes to singing. I that you already were talking about that self prophecy, like materializing that. I actually, it started with a small thought of like, I can't sing, or I'm losing my voice. And it built into where I physically could no longer sing. I went to all these doctors, and I even went to vocal training. And at the end of the day, it was all mental. It was all this whole thought process and this, psychological component that actually hindered from me physically singing. And I struggled for over a year with feeling like I'm losing my voice. And it really showed me how powerful the mind is at, creating these narratives that maybe have zero truth to them. That was really difficult as a singer, something that I still struggle with to this day, of just having to remind myself, like, that's not real. Stick to what's real. What can people do in those kinds of situations, like whether it's something with their, physical talent, or just trying to step into the studio and feeling like I deserve to be here, which is also another situation that I feel a lot of people experience. You get invited on stage, or you get invited into a writing session. It can be really tough to kind of sometimes feel like I deserve to be in this room.
Mm-hmm. There's, again, it's going to be very different for everybody, but a lot of it's going to seem very standard and very simplistic. Just a couple of things that off the top of my head are making sure that you're practicing. You want to make sure that you're at a level that you're confident with. If you haven't practiced at all, to think that you're going to go out and have the best show of your life is probably unreasonable, compared to if you've spent the last week, practicing this one song, to think that you're going to go up on stage and suddenly just like not have to think about it and the notes are just going to naturally come. It's probably pretty common because you're more relaxed and now your body is actually starting to allow it to happen. So just simply practicing and being confident in your own skills. Also putting yourself out in smaller situations that allow you to start getting back into the setting that you feel comfortable in. In athletics, they always refer to this as the yips. So you've been a perfect free throw shooter your entire life, and now all of a sudden you can't hit the backboard. And all the research has shown that there is no physical change that you've done to your shot. It's your own mindset. So start small. Stop trying to, your next show doesn't need to be in the biggest arena you can find. Go to that open mic at a bar, maybe where nobody knows who you are, if that's, a possibility, and just get on stage and just slowly start to reintegrate yourself. Just so that you can show yourself that you can be back on stage and that you can actually perform to a level that you really want to. The harder ones are really some of the simpler ones. Recognize some imperfections. Recognize that you're not going to be perfect. And in the world of art, there really is no perfection. So sometimes those imperfections make you unique. And recognizing that your voice is not going to sound like somebody else's, or maybe it does, but it's still your voice. Is going to allow you to find your own voice and find your own talents and skills. So rather than trying to be the imposter, you're just trying to be yourself. And once you can be yourself on stage, or as I can be myself as a therapist, I feel more comfortable with clients, because then I feel like I'm not trying to fabricate this idea. I'm just trying to help people the way I feel I can. And then just the last thing to always pay attention to is look for help. You're going to get me saying that you should always be looking for therapy and social support everywhere I go, but also learn skills from the people that are succeeding. So learn to meditate. Your mind is a muscle, and the more you meditate, the more you learn to flex that muscle and feel in control of it. So, if you can figure out that, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I need 5 minutes to get my brain back to what we would call regulated, then take 5 minutes. And if you haven't been able to do that, take the opportunity to learn. Sometimes those really little things can be sometimes most effective.
So spot on all of that. But something that also, I realized a while ago is sometimes what we call imposter syndrome is actually an ism, meaning it's sexism. like as a woman walking into the music industry or walking into a room with male musicians, they are in the majority. We live in a patriarchal society. And so my feeling as a woman walking in can feel like imposter syndrome, except when I really scroll out and look at it on a societal level, I realize that I am in a way an imposter. And that is not a bad thing, but the reason I feel that way is because of this institutionalized gender disparity or something like that. And I was experiencing this earlier this week, and I didn't realize this was what I was feeling, but I was mentally preparing to walk into a room with, these male musicians, all of whom are wonderful human beings. But it was a heightened, it was sort of an important moment in time for me. And I was feeling this building up of anxiety over the week as it was leading up to this moment. And I just had a talk with myself. I was like, Arielle, you invited them into the room. You are not the imposter. If anybody there, they would have been the imposters, except you opened the door to them there in the room, but recognize that maybe these feelings that you're feeling have to do with the historical structure of this industry or our society.
Absolutely.
Terra.
That absolutely resonates. I mean, there are so many times I've walked into the studio and, I'm the only woman in there, and you really have to, at least for me, I have to talk myself through it. Otherwise I can get really in my head about it, and minimize myself and, make my voice really small or non-existent at all. It's taken a lot of practice and a lot of years of realizing like, no, I belong in this room. I'm here for a reason. And that's almost like a mantra that I use when I go into situations, whether it's on stage or going into a studio space, like really, really having to hype myself up and be like, I belong here. I'm here for a reason. Like people see something in me. And that's absolutely happened so many times where I'll even write it on my hand if I need to, just have those tangible reminders. But Ari, you said something earlier about practicing, and it sounds so simple, but it's so real because when right now I'm prepping for a 10-year reunion with my very first band that I was in, and I'm having to relearn songs that I haven't sang in over a decade. And at first it was so daunting, just like this idea of having to relearn all this material. But then slowly I started practicing one song a day. And now it's like, oh yeah, this is muscle memory. I am good at this. I know what I'm doing. But it really was so intimidating until I finally was like, no, I just need a routine and I need to actually rehearse these things, which is a simple idea that is really easy to forget in the day-to-day. We actually have a question while we're waiting for Jenna, which if you've just jumped in, we're waiting on Jenna Andrews to join. She is tangled up after a songwriting camp, which is the life of an artist. So we get it. But we do have a question from someone. It's moving on a little bit more to performance anxiety, which is something that is very, very real.
Although, Terra, I think this question that you're about to ask, I think this plays exactly into what you were just saying about practicing, right? Go ahead and read the question, but
yes. Yeah. This person says, I don't feel fear, but anytime I perform, my hands shake so badly that I almost can't play my instrument and my voice shakes as well. I've been told that this is performance anxiety, but no one has been able to help. What can I do about this? It's really affecting my life.
I can really identify with this physiological response to that anxiety. And just to go back to what you were saying, Terra, about practicing, I feel like, you practice when times are good so that when times are hard, you can just rely back on that muscle memory that you were talking about. And that's been my technique for the most part, is just, practice the hell out of whatever it is that I rehearse. And also visualize, like try to put myself as much in that mental state of like, okay, I know the room, even if I've never been on that stage, if I'm loading in for sound check or something, like getting in there. A friend of mine, she said that she always walks the whole perimeter of the room. No matter how big of a space or how small of a space, she walks the whole perimeter so that she can see it from the perspective of everybody that would be in the room once attendees arrive. And I don't remember to do the whole perimeter all the time, but I do think about that, like, oh yeah, like, let me just sit over there and walk over there, and like the corners of the space that I am not necessarily going to accidentally be in, but to try to gain comfort and, just, I guess, a sense of control. Like when you're on stage, you're right there at the front of everybody, but you don't know how everybody is seeing you. So if you have that time to walk it, sit in the chairs and, stand by the bar or whatever the space looks like.
Yeah. And I think with practicing, for me, I had to know, like, just do a little bit each day. It doesn't have to be this huge, massive 2-hour block, because a lot of us don't have that time. So for me, if I don't have a ton of time, 10-minute vocal warm-ups every day, just getting more, comfortable in my voice and my body, and just reminding myself, like, I know how to do these scales. I can do this, to get the chatter out of your brain. And then just repetition, I find, because that's definitely something that over the last 2 years, 3 years, since the pandemic, honestly. Before the pandemic, I toured 8 months out of the year. Then, of course, like all of us, nothing. And then to jump back into it, even now, I'm still really dealing with, I almost hate performing. And it's only because of my anxiety. I actually love it and enjoy it when I'm on stage, but it's the anxiety prior to stepping on stage that really takes a toll. And so really trying every day to have that routine of vocal warm-ups has done wonders just for my confidence as a performer and as a singer. Just kind of checking in with yourself, I think, has really helped. And like Ari mentioned, meditating, it's kind of like that. Vocal warm-ups or any type of like mantra or anything, any kind of practice, I think, will really help kind of quell those feelings.
Oh, sorry, Ari, go ahead.
So just to add on to that, just to add a couple like tangible things to do while you're kind of in the heat of the moment. The first thing is acknowledging what anxiety is and anxiety's ability to get us out of an uncomfortable situation. And there are many people that no matter how many times you've stood in front of 10,000 people on a stage by yourself, that's just not a natural position to be in. So it's okay to be anxious in front of 10,000 people who are all locked on you. That's a natural response. That's a healthy response. And as you get more comfortable, your response might change. But the idea that you may want to get rid of that completely might change your desire to do things. Sometimes that anxiety can really fuel you. So I want to offer a couple tangible, like in the heat of the moment tools, but also just remember that anxiety is a very, very useful tool that also allows us to stay safe in dangerous situations. And the idea of fight or flight is not necessarily the best example. But, in many cases, your body is saying, like, I'm uncomfortable here, so let's get ourselves out. And that can be really helpful. So really just a couple of things, just right off the bat that I always like to mention whenever people are starting to have either like a panic attack, or they're having any kind of anxiety in a situation, so a situational anxiety attack. The idea is meditation is always going to be great. That's not always the best right now mode, because meditation sometimes takes calmness and quiet and practice and music or whatever it might be. So having just basic grounding techniques can be really, really helpful. So grounding techniques can be anything that just brings you to exactly what's going on right now. So I like to use my 5 senses. So what's one thing that you hear, see, smell, maybe taste, and feel right now? And then go through those and be very deliberate. So I hear my son screaming downstairs. I smell the grass got cut today and a window's open. I can smell the grass. But you're telling yourself this very out loud and deliberately, because the idea is your brain is not in theory meant to multitask. Your brain has learned over the years to do 2 things independently but simultaneously. So your brain can't both can't worry and calm itself at the same time. It kind of needs to pick and choose its battles. So if you're going, I'm safe, I can count to 5, I can feel my shirt and notice the texture of it, I can smell this candle that's very potent, your brain is going to start to go, I can relax. I'm focusing on other things that aren't worrying or danger related. So your body will actually start to count down. So some very basic backstage grounding techniques, count to 5, and point out different things you see, smell, and hear, just that senses work that we just said. My favorite one is also get something spicy, whether that's for you, big red gum, a fireball, a little bit of hot sauce, and put it in your mouth and actually try and be very mindful of like, I feel the tingling on my tongue. Now it's made it to my cheeks. Now it's starting to minimize. You're really kind of in the heat of the moment, figuring out what's going on. And if you're not a huge fan of spicy food, another really helpful way to do this is freeze a piece of citrus. So an orange, a lemon, a grapefruit. If you freeze it and then you poke it, it sprays out a little bit of citrus smell, and it gives you that kind of it gives you a little bit of a spike. And what people have found is that when that spike can happen, it can bring down your anxiety because you're focusing on this other new tool that just got introduced. So those are just a couple of very basic things that can be very helpful. And there's always, you can go online and look up like basic grounding techniques. And I just always say everyone is good and everyone is bad. You just have to figure out which ones work for you.
I love that. I that is so helpful. I hope it was helpful to the person who asked that question, because like you said, that's fascinating to me that the brain can't like handle worrying and focusing on a technique or a sense. So that's amazing to kind of be able to distract yourself and whatnot. Jenna, we have Jenna here. Jenna, thank you so much for joining. We get that songwriting life. We get it so much. So thank you so much for joining us. We have about a half hour left, so we'd love to just jump in. Right now we have Ari Jacobson, Backline's clinical director, and obviously, Arielle from the SONA Foundation. I'm Terra Lopez from Backline, and we've been talking about imposter syndrome and performance anxiety, something that Arielle and I have absolutely experienced. Would you like to share any, do you also experience imposter syndrome and or performance anxiety?
You're on mute, Jenna. The most common phrase of the last 3.5 years.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. No, of course, Arielle and I actually were discussing, just some pretty prominent topics in terms of, mental health in general and just around the creative community and all that. And I think that imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people struggle from, just because I think, you come into this business and it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. So you're not sure like where you fit in, even though it's interesting, because as a creative person, to stick out is really honestly more the goal. So it's funny how we end up being, kind of boxing ourselves in. And I think that's something that is an ongoing, self-talk thing that you have to sort of tell, like, self-medicate in a way, not through actual self-medicating, but just through like healing yourself and trying to self-talk rather, just because it's like, I don't know. I think it's a tricky thing, because it's, of course, people, especially I think in the LA community, want to be like accepted in the sense of like success, right? But like at the end of the day, when it really comes down to it, we're just people. And I think when you really think about it, the best songs that are ever really written, or the best, the most respected artists, are really not for like how successful on paper they are. It's more about like, do you respect them as art? Like, it's like we're attracted to like real human things. I think we just forget about it, So well, I think that's what makes it interesting.
That.
Whoa, sorry, what did you say?
Social media doesn't help, that situation either. It just kind of perpetuates. But yeah, you're totally right. Like, we care about what's actually real or who the person is that wrote that song rather than the success of that song.
Well, I think it's just more so like the thing, what I find is that once the ego's pulled away and all those things that people like, the imposter syndrome aspect of it is pulled away, like what is becomes really attractive is what, I know it's like cliche, but it's like what's on the inside, right? So like the human is the attractive aspect, and that's what makes a great song, is the vulnerability of being you. And honestly, like what's interesting is that there's only one of you in the whole world. It's only one of you, me, everyone on this call. Like there's no another replicate of each person that exists. So like no matter how you break it down, it's like there's something so unique and special about every single person. But I think that it's just, it's hard to feel confident in that around a community that's seemingly judgmental. But at the end, but I say that like I say that in a way to say that like seemingly, because I think that once you, like, again, most people, once you tear down those like the icebreaker moments and all that stuff, you realize that we're all just kind of the same. That's what I've, you know.
Jenna, you're making me think about like, we have this idea of perfection, which is something that computers can do, or for all of time, people have associated with the idea of God, what God is, perfect, right? And those are different than humans. And the thing that has, been this timeless thread throughout for humanity has been storytelling and music, and like the way that we pass down stories, history, knowledge, feelings, all of this stuff is created and communicated by songs and stories. And that is that's a human thing. And what's so beautiful is that those, through reading other people's songs or hearing their stories, I have learned things that I haven't yet figured out how to navigate through. It's very much dependent on it being human created. That is what gives it its power. And by definition, that's not going to be quote unquote perfect. It's almost like, but it can create this sense of wholeness,
And that's, well, that, I love that you just said that, because honestly, like, it's so beautiful to be able to reveal your flaws to people, because I think that that's what tears down the nervousness and stuff. Because I think once you show people your flaws, they're like, oh, I don't have to feel like, and I think that even though you might think they're going to judge you or think that it's like, bad or silly or like fucked up, however they view you, it's like kind of interesting, because no matter what, if you just wear it with like confidence, people will respect it. I always say, like, that's why I love fashion, because I think if you own fashion can make it, you can make fashion anything. Like you could literally cut out a garbage bag and make it look sick, and people will be like, damn, that garbage bag looks fire. Like, you know what I mean? And I just think that's such a cool thing, but it's more about the energy you present rather than what the actual superficial thing you're bringing into the table. That's how I feel.
And I want to add to that, because I think what you just mentioned is really valuable, where being yourself and making your own yourself is really important, because in the realm of like performance anxiety, it's, are you going up there and performing to the realm that you think you're capable of or that you want to?
Right.
So with especially musicians who are about to get on stage and are starting to notice, to kind of touch back onto one thing that one of the questions had asked about, like, I'm about to get on stage and I start to shake and I'm worrying and I'm not, my first question is always just like, what are you doing beforehand? Like, let's take the 5-10 minutes beforehand and let's map out your 10-15 minutes, what that looks like. Are you drinking? Are you doing drugs? Are you running around trying to get everything done before you go on stage? Are you taking 5 minutes for yourself and just doing some deep breathing? There is this very strong ability we have to really calm ourselves with deep breathing and focusing and not trying to spread ourselves thin before we put ourselves into a very vulnerable situation, where you're kind of like plugging your proverbial battery in, saying, let me charge up for a couple minutes before I start to use some of this energy. And what you actually find is that the more you get comfortable in certain situations, so the more you're comfortable on stage, then your body will actually start to go, oh, I'm about to get on stage. It will start to release chemicals that will allow you to avoid some of those anxiety related fears and say, like, I'm preparing for an uncomfortable situation. But every time you change to a new type of venue, new type of size venue, depending on what it might look like, you're going to have some of those anxieties come out. So being able to recognize, like, yes, this is the same, but it's still very different. It's still a performance that I'm doing tonight. It's not going to compare to my performance from 3 weeks ago. So breaking things down very by compartmentalizing some of these things, and to have a better understanding of what you're doing right now, then you can start to focus on your anxiety right now, not your anxiety as a whole.
Well, yeah, and it's actually interesting that you say that, because performance anxiety is, I think you just said it, like, it's like you have to be very cognizant of what is going to be the way for you to be prepared. But that's the thing that I mostly wanted to say, is that regardless of the insecurity and all those things, I think that you should be competing with yourself, right? So it's like, if you go on and you know that you only did half as good as what you could have if you did the proper things to prepare yourself, whatever, what did they say, like, success is an element of luck. What is it? Luck, preparation, and there's you know what I'm talking about? There's like the 3-1, but is it luck, preparation, and maybe like, I know it's not, it should be hard work. I don't think that's the other one. But the point is that, like, I think that provides a lot of confidence in itself, because I think that if you just kind of like aren't prepared for the situations you're in, that's a different story, because obviously that can cause anxiety for different reasons. But I think that if you come in prepared and competing with yourself and knowing that you're capable and you have all the abilities and just feel like confident that you're able to deliver, then I think that provides you security enough not to feel like the fears that are on the imposter syndrome side of things. I think, for me at least, just because it's like, if you feel unprepared and you feel like you're not delivering, then all those other things will start to rush into your head.
Right.
You know, I love that, Jenna. I love that. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is the sense of play. We play music, right? And I have suffered, this was the narrative that I told myself for a long time. I have suffered a lifelong case of stage fright, right? This was the story, because I'm relating to the person in the chat who asked this question about performance anxiety. And for me, I for a long time had all of those physiological symptoms: hands shaking, voice getting tight, which causes, of course, not only pitchiness, but like, you know, this, like, you just don't have the full capacity of your instrument if you're tight in your body. And I was like we were talking about earlier, I was finding all the evidence to support that idea that I have suffered for my entire life with stage fright. But then recently I accessed this memory of before that, of even younger, before the stage fright happened. I remembered when I was really little and in dance, and, you know, it was probably my first ballet recital. I was probably like 3 years old, right? And wearing the little tutu and the little outfit. And the way the story goes is that after, you know, the group of, you know, toddlers, really, after we all finished our routine and the music stopped and we curtsied and then went off the stage, the story goes that I didn't leave the stage. I stepped forward and I did the whole routine again. And I remembered this story recently, and I was like, oh, I did not have stage fright at that time. What I had at that time was a love of the stage, a love of the music, a love of the costume and the lights and the magical world of this theater. And ever since I tapped back into that memory, I've reframed the story that I have not had lifelong stage fright. I only had stage fright that came in at whatever point in my life I became aware of fitting in or not fitting in. And as you were saying, Ari, like that danger of stepping out and you know, making yourself vulnerable, that was where the stage fright happened. But before that, there was the play and the delight of the music and the performance. And so someone had asked in the chat box, had said that, how do I get back to the controlled, confident level of live performance and get rid of that nervousness that was not an issue before? And I wonder if that's part of how to get back to that, is to tap into a memory where it was delightful to be performing, where you loved the music before it was ever this, you know, this ambitious thing that created this bigger story.
Well, I
So that really resonates with me because for a long time, when I was really struggling with my voice or the narrative that I built in my head that I was struggling with my voice, every time I go into the studio, I'd feel this dread and this fear rather than excitement or, like how cool I get to do this, for a living. And I really have had to retrain my thought process of like, why did I even start singing in the first place? Oh, I love it. I love the act of this. I love how my body feels when I sing or when I perform. And so I have had to kind of go back and kind of remember, like, block everything else out, block like the expectations, block the trying to sing perfect, like just try to, like Jenna was saying, like be you. That has really, really, really helped me. There's a question here by Amy. What about the story or the framework of maybe I am just not a performer? Is there a performer personality? Are some people just not performers? What do y'all think?
In Elizabeth Gilbert's book Big Magic, she, and also in Arielle Gore's book, So You Want to Be a Famous Writer, I think is the name of that book. But in both of these books, the writers kind of tackle this question. Elizabeth Gilbert says, list all those stories, like I'm too straight, I'm too gay, I'm too white, I'm too black, I had a happy childhood, I had a sad childhood, I am not educated enough, I am too educated, I am too serious, I am too not serious, like all of these things. It's like, I'm too poor, I'm too rich, and it's like, as you go through these stories, at some point in time you realize that there is no end to those things. And kind of going back, Terra, to what you and I were saying, at some point in time you realize that there is no end to it, and it's like, okay, let's get back to the work. Like, what is it that I actually want to be doing? What gives me, what is my purpose here on planet Earth? What is my, as Jenna, you were saying, like my particular collection of who makes me human? Like, what is my best contribution in the amount of time that I have on this planet?
And I will add, yes, there are studies and there are assessments you can take to see your personality type. And yes, scientifically and statistically, there will be people who in theory would be more of a performer than others. But for everybody that we can find that would fit the bill of being a performer, we're also going to find the same person who's an accountant, or an accountant who is wildly successful on the stage and doesn't fit their personality profile. It's in when working with clients, I'm a big believer that diagnosing is a really important tool for a couple of things, to help give an understanding to people who don't quite understand what they might be struggling with, medication purposes. So if you know that somebody experiences a certain type of disorder, treating them with certain medications is or is not going to be helpful or in certain ways. And then also setting tangible goals. Just what do we want to try and accomplish in the next 6 months with regard to your blank? With our own personality, with that, we kind of have to learn to develop our own thing. The same way, if I have anxiety and you have anxiety, how that anxiety looks is going to look very different in both of us. And in many cases, a client that sits in my office today and tomorrow, who both explain the exact same symptoms, are going to present it incredibly different. So being able to understand your own symptoms, but then also your own expectations and who's making those expectations. So are you the person who is comfortable being on a certain size stage and you really love the work that you're doing? Or are you getting somebody in the background who's telling you, no, you should be on MTV doing this, this, and this, and selling your cattle. And now you have this pressure to be this person that suddenly you're not. And now your anxiety is, well, am I that person? And that's not performance anxiety or imposter syndrome. That's somebody trying to fit a square peg into a circle hole, and that's just not you. So being able to be understanding of your own self, and then also being confident with yourself. So there's a lot of research and there's a lot of tactics in terms of just using positive self-talk to make sure that you are maintaining that positive mentality. So there's a lot of research that says put a sticky note on your window or on your mirror for when you wake up and you brush your teeth that just says, today's going to be a great day, or you're worth it, or yes, just something positive that makes you feel good. And again, statistically, that is proven to show a positive impact on somebody who is struggling with the same thing, and not just reminding themselves that there is positivity out there. It's It's a muscle that you're learning to flex. And the more you flex the positive muscle, the more it's going to trump the negative muscle that's going to kind of hide there in the background.
Right. And like, I love that you just said that because it kind of leads into like, obviously what manifesting is, right? So it's like I honestly think that it's all mind control. I think anybody can be anything if you met like, but it's your mind is so powerful. So I think that like, what's so crazy is that people say like negativity can manifest itself the same way positivity can, right? Like there's a reason why people say when it rains, it pours, because it's like, as soon as you start letting those negative thoughts like take over, then of course, like you're going to get home and you're going to get a ticket, and then you're going to get some kind of weird debt or like whatever happens when people are like, oh, why is this all happening to me? But it's because your brain is programmed that way. So like, I mean, listen, I'm definitely not trained. I'm not saying that like, I'm not I'm not basing this on research. It's just more so experience in terms of what I feel and what I've seen in life. Like, I really do think that if somebody who didn't think they were a performer and thought like, oh, I don't have the personality type, just all of a sudden like reprogrammed their brain into a way that energetically was like, susceptible to different type of energies, because sometimes we block those energies. So we can't even necessarily know what that feels like or experience that feeling because we don't even let it in. So imagine they just were like, oh, one day they're like, I'm free. Like you just let your mind free. Imagine what could happen. So yeah.
And just to add on to exactly what you were saying that I think is really important is set reasonable and tangible goals. And a goal doesn't have to be, I'm going to win $1 million tomorrow.
Right.
The goal can be, I want to at least do the very, very, very first step of the next goal. And if I can say that I accomplished that today, then that's a success. So I've been trying to relearn how to play the piano. It's been years since I've touched one, but I still can feel that I have some of those skills back there. But the idea of being able to get back to the music I was playing when I stopped playing is just unreasonable at the moment. But if I can get, good old fashioned chopsticks down without any errors, then today's a good day because I at least got a step forward. And so in many cases, we're going into situations to try and tackle mental health issues to solve them, and solving them right now is just unreasonable. If that was the case, then you'd all come to me, I'd give you one piece of advice and I'd be like, all right, you're done, get out of here. There's an old Saturday Night Live skit where the person comes in and they just go, you're fine, deal with it, and then that's it. But that's just not the way this works. We're learning to take a behavior that in theory has worked. It has validated a feeling that we may not like, but that was the feeling we had. It has reinforced a behavior that we don't particularly like. I'm shaking every time I get on stage, but if we really broke it down, we might find a time where you were in a situation that felt really uncomfortable and that shaking allowed you to recognize that, get yourself off stage, and then feel comfortable. And now your brain just went, I found something that works, and we're going to put this in our toolbox and we're going to use it the next time we need something. And especially the time when we don't have time to think about what our tools are, like those subconscious toolbox tools are always the ones that work the quickest and the best and are rarely the healthiest and most effective.
Well, it's so funny because like what you were saying, like well, two things, the $1 million thing, because I think when The Secret first came out, people were like, this doesn't work. But it's kind of like exactly to your point where you're like, you can't just be like, oh, one day wake up and be like, oh, I'm going to wake up with a check in the mail. It's not about that. It's about the process. So I love that you said that because it's about understanding like the journey of the positivity every day, and sort of what I value about therapy and what I think that like what you just said, like it's not about one session, it's about talking about it, right? And talking all these things through. But another interesting point that I think I'm personally trying to work on is I think that when you're almost like too self-aware, that's also like hard to reprogram your mind, because that like causes the shaking. Because like I'm very self-aware and I understand where the feelings are coming from for the most part, right? But like that's almost scarier because you feel like, oh my God, like I have way too much knowledge over my own self, and that in itself is scary,
And I'll tell you, when I was in school to get my degree in counseling, in your ethics class, or at least in my ethics class at the school that I went to, you spend a good amount of time going, you're about to learn about some really intense things that go on in people's minds and symptoms and diagnosing. Do not start diagnosing yourself,
Right.
because you are going to fit into every box that you think you're going to. because you're going to go, oh, that one time I didn't sleep for this amount of days, so clearly I'm bipolar. And we're going, no, that's not the case. And so there's a lot of conversations with providers. There's a term for it that I'm simply just blanking on, where you are medical school student syndrome, where medical students tend to find, oh, I must have high blood pressure because of this, and it's just not the case. You're overanalyzing things. So to be very self-aware, but also, like you said, not overly self-aware. If you think you're having a weird effect, is that something that's happening right now? Or is that something that happens every time you do whatever it is? You're going to have some weird behaviors that come out in unfamiliar situations because your body goes, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And then just produces this reaction. How you kind of react to that secondary reaction is really what you can control. So like somebody could come burst through my door right now and I might jump. That's a natural reaction. But once I look at the person and go, oh, they look confused, I can be calm. Oh, they look scared, I can help. They look aggressive, I need to react. We can focus really heavily, like in therapy, we spend a lot more time focusing on that secondary reaction than that first reaction, because that first reaction isn't always just so unnatural.
Which, by the way, brings us back to imposter syndrome, because the first reaction or the first reading that you do of a person isn't necessarily where you end up landing when you get to know them, right? So it's like that exact thing that you just said is like you walk in and you see this person and it's like they may be cold or whatever, but you don't know what's going on through their day. So you think, oh, this person's got to be an asshole or doesn't like me or thinks I suck. But then you realize as the curtains unfold that you're like, oh, this is a completely different person that I initially didn't see because I was looking at them with that first reaction. So I love that.
And just hopefully they're mowing my lawn, so hopefully you can hear me through this last thing. With that thought, so one of the skills that I would also encourage clients who are really trying to first learn how to implement positive self-talk to avoid that negative thoughts is put yourself in traffic. Somebody's going to cut you off today, tomorrow. If you're in New York City and you don't drive, somebody's going to walk in front of you or bump you in the shoulder. And your first thought is going to be like, ah, that asshole, or like, damn, I'm stuck in traffic, or like, God, why'd they cut me off? Try to think the other way. Maybe they didn't see me. Maybe they're in a rush and bumping into me is not on, it's not on their priority list right now. Maybe they're just in a really bad mood and this has nothing to do with me. Right. And so you start practicing that really, really overly positive, like the world is perfect and I'm going to find the perfect in everything. And then what you actually start to do is it becomes easier. And then you start to believe it, because the more you tell yourself something, the more you're reinforcing these connections in your brain to believe them. I'm not saying you're believing lies. I'm saying you're finally seeing the truth behind some of these statements and recognizing the success behind them. And then one day somebody cuts you off in traffic and you go, oh, I'm just glad they didn't hit me. You go, ah, look at that. That was my first reaction today. And then acknowledge it. By acknowledging it, it reinforces it and it allows your brain subconsciously to go, ah, that's really what I'm looking for.
No, and that's crazy. I love that, like that, how like why people admire like quote unquote crazy people, because it's like those people are like relentless, right? So they're just like, I'm going to be unapologetically me. To what you're explaining, it's like to like obviously a higher extent, not to say that you can be whatever that may be, but it's just like sometimes it's like if a person comes in and says these like crazy things, people end up being like, oh, okay, yeah. Like at first it might be a little like jarring, but then you end up like really like admiring it. And I think that it's just like it's a hard thing to like you said, like constantly just tell yourself like, oh shoot, like doesn't matter if people judge me. It's like, if you have this positive outlook, like people will probably look at you and respect it. I mean, and if they don't, then who cares? You know what I mean?
This conversation has been awesome and super fascinating. And I just have to say, as an artist, I have been taking notes and am ready to combat this imposter syndrome that I have experienced, and also performance anxiety. Like I am ready to just slay that. So thank you all so much for this conversation. I think it's been super helpful. I hope that the folks watching this, that it's been super helpful. And we're going to have this whole video up on YouTube, so you can rewatch it, take your notes, share with friends. Also, please make sure to go to backline.care. We had someone ask, Ari, if you see patients, clients, how can we be in touch with you? So go to backline.care. We have a whole case management submission process. Everything is confidential. You'll get set up one-on-one with someone who's going to understand your lifestyle, understand this life, understand this unique struggles and the stresses. And all of it's free. We have your back. So go to backline.care, go to sonafoundation.com, check out the resources they have for all music creators. Jenna, really want to thank you for your time. Seriously, thank you so much for coming through. I know you have such a hectic schedule, and we really, really appreciate you and your insight. Ari and Arielle, thank you so much as well for having this conversation with us. It's so important. And I think every month we start to see we're not alone. I think these conversations really help show us like, oh, don't get in your head, because we're all feeling some type of way. So thanks so much.
Terra, thank you so much for and to Backline for being a partner with the SONA Foundation on these fireside chats. They're so great. And next month we are going to be talking again. Can't wait for the next conversation. I think it's going to be about grief and loss, and always from a songwriter perspective, for a conversation with songwriters about the songwriter life. But of course, we're all humans, and just trying to help each other navigate all of this stuff. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I appreciate it. Again, I'm so sorry I was late, but I honestly love this. I mean, it's my, clearly, that I'm very into this with my own, obviously, podcast with the green room and stuff. So like I think it's just healthy to talk about it. Even in this, it's cathartic for us, but also for whoever's listening. And it's just honestly great way to start your day. So
And then I just want to finish off real quick by just saying, remember, Backline is available for those of you who asked about how to get in touch with me. You get in touch with Backline, you get in touch with me. I'm located in Maryland. I can only practice in the state of Maryland. But if you are in another state, what we do best is help you find somebody in your area that's going to look and help you with things that you need. So whether that's a therapist, life coach, medication, if it's yoga, acupuncture, mindfulness, whatever it could be. We are just over the 600 provider mark, and we are growing. So please reach out to us. You can email us at hello@backline.care. We will respond, I promise you. But that's what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. And the SONA Foundation has, on the mental health resource page, we also have the link to the Backline Care website, so you can find all those resources there. So yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I also recently, I don't know if you know this, Terra, but I did an episode on the green room with Backline. So this would be really cool. If you guys could send me this, I'd love to link it to that and be able to obviously share the resources on both of our platforms, because I think it's really great for people. So
absolutely. Awesome. We'll send you this video right after.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you all so much, and see us next month.
Okay.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.